Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. So today we continue to discuss about the life of Buddha. And last time we discussed about uh, after Buddha went back to the Tirupur monastery in Savatthi. So he allowed the two groups of monks to come together so that they could make the dependence to resolve the disharmony and the conflicts. And after that, the Buddha accepted their dependence. So later on, the Buddha laid down 7 ways how to resolve the conflicts. So the first one is called the practice of face-to-face sitting. That's mean the entire communities of monks on both sides would need to be present to talk about this kind of conflicts so that it would avoid any kind of private conversation that may influence others people to take side to one side and others to create more discord on attention. That's been both sides of the parties. One that have conflicts, they need to come together in public setting, not in private setting. That's why they call face-to-face sitting. That means both sides come to face-to-face to resolve the conflicts. And the second practice is considered as the remembrance. That's when communities, both parties involved with the conflicts, they need to recall or remember from the beginnings up to that moment of the reason or the problems that create the conflicts. So they should try to remember as much as possible all the detailed information that led to those conflicts. And definitely the witnesses and evidence should be provided. So the committees of both sides should listen quietly and patiently to both sides so that they can understand the situation and eventually to examine the dispute. So that's the second practice. The third practice is non-stubbornness. That's when both parties come to resolve the conflicts. So they need to be ready to have the willingness to reach reconciliation so that they could resolve the problems. If they just insist on their rights, that is called the stubbornness, and it's considered as a negative and counterproductive because if one party insists on their rights and all the party is strong, there's no way to reconcile. That's why when they come together, they need to put their ego down. They need to come with the compromises with intention to resolve the conflict, not to create more discord or disharmony. So that is the third practice of non-stubbornness. And the fourth practice is voluntary compassion. That means both sides need to recognize their own mistake and shortcomings without having been reminded by other parties or the elders. That means they need to voluntarily explain their mistake or shortcomings. And if they fail to do so, it's not easy for them to resolve the conflict. If they insist that they are right and all the people, all the parties is wrong. So basically, each party needs to recognize the mistake before any kind of reconciliation, any kind of resolving of the conflict. So that's what we call the voluntary compassion. Basically, they need to confess the mistake and shortcomings with each other. Because in any kind of conflict, we need to recognize our shortcoming. But if we still blame on other person's mistake, insist on our right, there's no way for us to reconcile any kind of conflicts. And the fifth practice is for the accepting the verdict. So when the verdict is reached, that everyone should come to the agreement without any kind of dispute. After the committees have listened the shortcoming of both parties, so they are ready to accept the verdicts of the whole community. And the nemesis is that they need to abide the decision by the consensus. And that's been after in both sides, they have the willingness to accept the final verdicts of the communities. They would recite the verdicts 3 times. After reciting that verdict 3 times, and everyone is silent, no one raised their voice to protest. So that verdict has the authorities or is considered as a legal binding verdict. And the last one, the seventh practice, is considered as a covering mud with straw. That's been during the meetings, so each party invites one elder monks to represent them, so that they could listen to the problems of the conflict for each side, and they try to reconcile and forgive others' people mistake due to their seniority in the Sangha. So that is why the junior one could put the curse on them to have the final word about the words, final words about the reconciliation of the conflicts, so that any kind of future conflicts, dispute, and argument could be resolved peacefully and harmoniously. So basically, each party choose their own elders, monks who represent, so that they could follow that kind of leader to resolve the conflicts. So uh, that are the ways that how the Buddha laid down these seven ways to resolve the conflicts in the Buddhist communities, because living together, there's some kind of consensus. Otherwise, if we don't have any kind of compromises and consensus, there's no way for us to live together. And that's why at first the Buddha laid down the six principle of harmonies that we have learned before, and now he laid down another set of practice to deal with future conflicts, so that everyone can be happy to practice in the communities, in the monastery, because eventually will be hundreds of thousands and thousands of monks and then to live together within a monastery communities. So without those type of rules and consensus, there's no way for them to live together. And it's applicable in any type of communities, groups, business, and so forth. That's why we have some kind of bylaw to run the business, to operate and operation, and so forth. So the Buddha remind at that Chetapuro monastery for 6 months, and after that he returned to Raja Gaha. That let me show you one more time the map of the Buddha paths when he went around back and forth among those places. Let me share with you here. Okay, here. So you see, these are the places that the Buddha used to go, and this is the path that where he walked along those cities. So after staying Samadhi for 6 months, the Buddha walked back to Raja Gaha. This is from here. This is the capital city of Mangada. So on the way, the Buddha met a young boy. So his name is Savatis. So he came from the village of Ruvela. So let me show you one more time the map, so that we can follow my explanation. Let's see. We go with the map here. And this is the route here. Okay. This is the Magada. Hmm. Another one is go back here. Okay, here on the Jagahan, went to Gaya when he attained enlightenment, where he visits the Guru Vela. That's the place where he practiced self-culture. Exercise practice for 6 years before he went to Bodhi Gaya uh, to sit under the retreats and enlightenment. So he went back to this place um, and he met that young man. He was the young man that offered him the food right before his attain enlightenment. Uh, so the Buddha visits his family first, and of course at that time Swati was about 21 years old. So he returned to fulfill the promise that he would accept him into the Buddhist communities uh, of monks and nuns. So, so at that time, Siddhartha was abandoned and became one of the close friends of Rahula. And we know Rahula was the son, the only son of Queen Siddhartha, as the Buddha later on. So uh, Swati followed the Buddhist monks' guidance, and uh, even he listened to the teaching from the other Buddhist Sangha members like Ananda, Asaji, and so forth. But he become the close friends with Rahula. Mm, and even Rahula was young than him, but because he left home to become novice when he was only 6 years old, he has more experience in living in the monastic communities. So uh, when Vasti was still a young boy, actually he came from untouchable class. Uh, that is the lower class in India, and he used to take care of for the buffalo and ox uh, for others. So when he was little, his sister taught him uh, some lesson, uh, guide him in education for several years. But later on, his sister left him to get married with another man in different village. So after become a monk, Swati uh, follow the elder ones, especially make prayers with Rahula to learn from Shambhala too. So uh, Rahula was asked by Venerable Sariputra to guide Swasti some basic practice of a monk, like how to wear the gloves, how to carry the baking bowl, how to walk, stand, lie down, sit, eat, and wash the clothes, especially listen to the Dhamma properly and mindfully. Uh, so that's why mm, he eventually know all the conducts of a Buddhist monk. Of course, at that time, the Buddha was still novice because he's still under 20, you ought to take the full vows as a monk. He just get the 10 percent of a novice, like they don't, or they cannot kill, they cannot steal, they cannot engage in sexual relation, they cannot skip post food, they cannot drink alcohol, they cannot wear jewelry, flowers, things. They cannot lie down on the fancy bed. They cannot participate in any secular dancing and singing. They cannot keep money for themselves or gold, and they cannot eat in the evening. So these are the basic rules, 10 rules of a Buddhist novices. But of course, in order to become fully ordained monks, they need to abide at least to 27 precepts. So Sarura also explained to Swati that during the first years of the Sangha of the Buddhist monastic communities, there was no precept because everyone was pure and everyone has pure intention to become Buddhist monks to practice on the spiritual path. So that's why Buddha has not established any kind of rules, precept yet, especially no one has made any mistake yet. But eventually, he established based on the cause and reason. So the origination was so simple that a person not only to request the Buddha or another monks and decide the three refuges 3 times. That means they decide the refuge that I take refuge to Buddha, I take refuge to the Dharma, I take refuge to the Sangha. So they just decide that prestation for 3 times. And that's so for them to become a Buddhist monk. Again, the taking 3 refuges and practice that later on become the foundation for the lay Buddhists. That means they need to rely on the Buddha as a refuge for them to walk on their spiritual path, because they trust Buddha as a light person, and due to his great wisdom, he is both the teachers, what we call Dharma. That's why the Buddhists need to take refuge or follow the Buddha teachers. And the last one is to take refuge with the Sangha, that's been the monastic communities, Buddhist monks, and who guide them on the way to enlightenment. So, but in early times, when no one has made any mistake yet, the Buddha just let anyone want to become Buddhist monk or nun to decide these 3 refuges 3 times, and after that they could add the rock and bowls as a fully ordained person. But later on, when the Buddhist monastic communities was enlarged, that's mean many people join in the monastic lives, and there's some people make a mistake. That's why, based on their mistake, the Buddha laid out some rules for all the monks to follow. So in any groups, any business, any communities, you have to have some kind of protocols, some kind of preparation, a law that people need to follow. And so if they want to build a house, they need to follow the city and counties rules and regulations, how to build the house. And if they work in any business, they need to abide the regulation and the law that were established by that the companies. They have more security. So that's why in Buddhist communities, Buddha laid out some precepts of regulation to prevent the conflicts, to prevent the downfall of the monks and nuns. So at first, again, there's no precept that Buddha laid out yet. That is the spirit of Buddhism, because the Buddha did not want to put anything that high down or make the burdens on the lives of his followers if no one made mistake yet. So he wait for someone make mistake. He would base on those mistakes to establish the rules, precepts, and regulations. So according to the records, they say that at first, again, there's no precept that Buddha laid out, but this was one monk. His name is Sudina. So before he was ordained, he married and lived in a village outside Vesali. So when he heard Buddha teaching, he asked to be a monk. So after that, he had the chance to visit his family again. So his family invite him for a meal in their home, and he accepted that invitation. So somehow, especially his mom, tried to create a scam for him to get back to secular life, not to follow the monkhood life, and so that he could run the family business. Of course, he would not agree with that, but his parents complained that he was only son in the families. There's no one to inherit the business, so they fear that the family wealth will be fall into someone else's hand. So in the past, of course, up to now too, if there's no one to take care of the business, the wealth, usually the wealth would be confiscated by the king of the country. It would belong to the public properties. That's what his parents are concerned about. So, but seeing to the determination to remain as the monk, so his mothers suggest that at least he could leave a child as an heir for them to take care, so that when his child grow up, he will take care of the family business. So at that time, because Buddha have not laid out any kind of precept yet, so he agreed with his former wives, and they engaged in sexual relation. And after that, his wife conceived and got birth to a boy. And they named him as Vijaka, that's means deceit. And somehow his friends, I mean that the monk Sudina parents call him the father of the Sikh. So from that time on, somehow the reputation of the Buddhist communities was tarnished. So the Buddha called the Buddhist monk confident and admonished Sudina. From that time on, the Buddha laid down the formal precept that prohibited monks to engage in marital association with the opposite sex, so that they could be free from obstruction in their spiritual path, the way to attain enlightenment. So that was the first time ever the Buddha established what we call Patimoksha, the precept for individual liberation. That's been whoever abide with that precept, they will be liberated from that kind of karmas. And so for Buddhist monks, in order to devote times and effort into the spiritual path, they need to be free from the family's responsibilities and secular responsibilities. If they still have families, if they still have wives, husbands, and children, they have to take care of the family business. They have to take care of their own children. There's not much time for them to devote for meditation, for spiritual practice, and that may hindrance, obstruct them to practice the way. That's why we would laid out first precept of not engage in sexual relation with the opposite sex for Buddhist monks and nuns. And later on, because of other Buddhist monks' mistake, the Buddha laid out 3 more important precepts that relate to stealing, killing, and claiming to attain insight or enlightenment. So these are the 4 important precepts that we call parajika. So that means for the Buddhist monk, the first precept is that they're not supposed to engage in a sexual relation with other people with opposite sex. And the second one is they're not supposed to steal other people's properties. The third is that they're not supposed to kill themselves, kill others, and just encourage others to kill. And the last one is that they're not supposed to make a false claim that they have attained enlightenment. So later on we can discuss in detail about those 4 basic major precepts. And of course, if the monks are known engage in this kind of relationship, if they steal, if they kill, and claim themselves that they have attained enlightenment without any base, they would not be accepted into the Buddhist communities at all. So that is a time where I laid out those type of major rules. Of course, beside that, there's all kind of rules that the monks and nuns want to follow, but they are dependable. That means if they commit to those precepts, if they violate those precepts, they may make the dependence So mm, when uh, the Samaritans follow Rahulas and other elder monks who study, especially Rahula. Rahula mentioned that even he was the Buddha's son, he was not treated with a special favor. Uh, so he also mentioned about when he first became a novice at the age of 11, when he's still young, he used to tell lie, and in the record it said that because he was the Buddha's son of the Prince Siddhartha's son, plus he was the youngest one in the Buddhist monastic communities. So everyone loved him, and so everyone spoiled him. And somehow at that time, this is so young that he could not understand what was right, what was wrong. So he just told lies to many people. Like when the Buddha was at the temple or monastery, he would tell people to leave. Uh, when they asked whether Buddha was at the temple or monastery or not, he would say no, and vice versa. When the Buddha went out um, of the monastery, when he was not at the monastery, when people inquire about where about the Buddha's was, so the Buddha would say he was at the monastery. So later on, they found out that he lied so many times that disturbed especially the Buddhist like people. But of course, no one uh, scold him because he's the youngest one. Uh, Most of people love him, care for him. That's why he took advantage of that. That's why he created this type of karma. And one day, when the Buddha knew about this kind of mm, problems with Rahula when he was about 11. So one day, when the Buddha walked back on the road and according to the traditions, the Buddha would wash his feet. And after washing the feet with the waters, the Buddha called Rahula and asked him, what do we do with this dirty water that he just washed his feet? And Rahula just mentioned that, oh, we just threw away those dirty water. So that's why the Buddha turned upside down the bowl, the containers that contain the dirty water that he just washed his feet. He just turned upside down and hold the water stand out, uh, spin out. So at that time, Buddha admonished um, the Buddha that, well, if you keep carrying like it's like dirty water, and no one can use it, um, they have to be thrown away. So you need to stop on carrying life for making problems within communities, and you need to tell the truth so that people can trust you. So from that time on, uh, mm, the Buddha promised to Buddha that he would not tell lie anymore. And eventually, he getting older and older, first more mature to handle his conduct. Uh, so that's a big lesson for him. That's why he called this story to Swati so that he could learn from his mistake, from Rahula's mistake. So let me share with you, this is the image illustrate how the Buddha taught Rahula about the dirty waters here. After he washed his feet, the Buddha turned upside down that containers and told Rahula that your hell life is similar as the dirty water. We need to throw away. We cannot use that. The Buddhist lesson here. Okay. So the next thing is that when Trustee knew learned from Rahula's mistake, a big lesson for him that he also promised that he would not tell lie, he would abide the monk precept. And according to the traditions, twice a month, on the new moon and full moon days, all the monks gather together to decide the monk precept and regulations, discipline, and so that they could remember what they follow. And so each precept was read loudly, and then the communities were asked if anyone had helped to keep the precept. If no one spoke, the next precept would be read. If someone violated the precept, he is supposed to stand up and make confession to communities, with the exception of the four Chantika. The confession was enough to make the amendments. That means if they just violate the minor precept, and that belongs to the four major ones. Four major ones is engaged in sexual relation with other sisters, stealing, killing, claiming falsely that they have attained enlightenment. So, except the violation of these four major precepts, not the precept, if they violate, could depend them in front of communities. So, according to the records, they say that during this 11 Lenin retreat, the Buddha also taught the Buddhist communities the teaching of how to take care of the water buffaloes. So, in the past, India, China, and Vietnam were agricultural countries. So most people follow the farming traditions, and that's why the water buffaloes and ox were very important for them to plow the fields, to carry the heavy works. So that's why the Buddha based upon how people work in those times to provide a teaching accordingly. So one day at the monastery of Venuvana, at that time there were many monks, including Rahula, Swati, and so forth, who came together to listen to the Buddha teachings of how to take care of water buffaloes. Like I said, that the water buffaloes is so important in the past, especially for people who live in farming, that they need to take care of water buffaloes, to do the plowing, and to carry the heavy works. Since time is up, let me stop here today. And next time I will discuss further about this teaching. Nam Mô Sakamni Buddha. See you soon.